Welcome everyone. Before we start, first of all, I would like to acknowledge the Pedigal people that are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders past and present and extend the respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are present here today. Welcome to the 11th edition of CFRC seminar series. We've already done 10, which is kind of like surprising, so I've done so many already. I would like to take the opportunity to apologize for rescheduling this event at a short notice 2 weeks back. It was unfortunate and unavoidable, so sorry again for any inconvenience caused. And hope everyone's doing good with the lockdown. Looks like New South Wales has crossed 70% of first dose numbers today, which is really good news. Hopefully, at this rate, we'll get meet back in campus soon before the end of the year, I guess. So coming to the seminar, our first speaker today is Ajith Jayasekare. Ajith is a postdoc with City Futures, working on the Value Australia project. So he did his PhD with the University of Wollongong in field of urban analytics and has a wide range of expertise from remote sensing, GIS, simulation, modeling and data visualization, etc. With a focus on machine learning and applications in spatial modeling. So he's currently using deep learning algorithms to predict property prices within the Value Australia project. And I'm looking forward to hear his talk today on resolution of elevation data and its effect on AVMs. So with that, I'll hand over to Ajith. Over to you, Ajith.
Thank you, Bala. Hi, good afternoon. This is more technical, actually. I just try to include some estimated data from digital data, especially elevation data. I try to estimate aesthetic view from aesthetic view and try to get the effect on AVM.
Sorry, Ajith, are you able to turn the volume up a little bit? It's I don't know if it's just me, it's a little faint.
Can you hear me now? Is it clear?
I think it's still the same. I don't know if you have any high volume. Maybe I just need to put my volume up.
Let me check from here. Can you say something? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit low, but I can hear what you're saying.
Okay.
Okay. And this presentation actually, I just want to relate the effect of the digital resolution of the digital elevation data on AVM. Aesthetic view, actually, aesthetic view in the residential area is very important because most of the time we spend our time on residential area, residential location, and it is very important for mental health as well as restoration, make our health, mental health and well-being. View is one of the landscape quality, and view can be actually what we can see from the land is most important. Sometimes it can see favorable views like water view, beach, mountain, also unfavorable like industrial. Those are effect on somehow negatively. It's a function of view is a function of ground of surrounding landscape and the above ground objects. How can we include the view in AVM equation? We can do it in a two-way as a Boolean variable or ratio variable. We can do field survey in order to get whether we can see some land use from a particular location. It's like a yes or no answer mostly, or we can do it digitally, like using software or digital data. In this study, I used 4 data sets. That's the location, mainly land parcels, land cover, and digital data, digital elevation data, that is the digital terrain model and digital surface model. What is digital surface model and what is digital terrain model? Both represent height, but digital terrain model represent only the elevation of the Earth surface. When it comes to digital surface model, it includes height of the above ground objects. If there is no above ground object, it represents the terrain. In my method, it's actually iterative process. Mainly, I use 4 data sets. You can see me. And what I did, I created one 1 kilometer buffer, because when there's a closer view has more effect on the AVM. It's based on the literature, and therefore I try to reduce the buffer into 1 kilometer. And then I extract the digital surface model for that 1 kilometer buffer. On the other side, DTM, I use DTM elevation for land surface, because we can modify anything on the land, and any obstacle we can clear. Therefore, I use that digital terrain model on the land area, and then overlay on top of the DSM. That means height of the area consists of DSM, and that's surrounding area, and height of the land parcel based on the DTM that can only contain height of the surface, Earth surface. And then I extract the view from land. Then visibility can extract for different land uses. In detail, you can see the DTM, the only DSM. That means it only represents height of the land, and other area, surrounding area, it includes most of the above ground, all the above ground object, buildings, trees, everything. You can see the area of interest in 3D, the right hand side picture. In the process, it actually extract, we can extract as a single view from single location, like a centroid, or we can do individual pixel. In my algorithm, what I did, I extract view for each pixel in the land parcel that create series of images which can which show the visibility. You can see in the dark color images, light, the white is the visible area, black represents the invisible area. At the end, it creates cumulative one image. That means visible area from all the all the pixels in the land parcel in the right-hand corner one. What's the influence of resolution? It influences mainly on the process. You can see this is the 2 meter resolution. and 1 meter resolution. For comparison, if you increase the resolution into 1 meter, for cover 2 meter pixel, the algorithm has to run 4 times rather than 1 in a 2 meter. It increases the processing time. When you think about the resolution of the DEM, high resolution digital surface model include more detail than low resolution one. When compare the 8 meter and 2 meter, you can see it's more like it's becoming flat when increasing the size of the pixel. Therefore, it is important to evaluate when the high resolution, you can see through a small area, but when it's come to low resolution like 8 meter, it interpolates between low levels and increase the height on that low level area. It actually creates barrier between favorable land use and the land parcel. How I estimate the view percentage? My area of interest is 1 kilometer buffer, but within the land, the red dot, you can see only small area, like green area. In that also visible river area is small part, that is the percentage between total river area and total visible area, that means black and the green area, blue area as percentage. For this study, I use series of digital elevation models, and digital surface model is 1 to 10 meter, 1 to 4, 6, 8, and 10 meter resolutions. What I did, this study is conducted only for Hunter Seal at the moment, but I think it needs to go beyond that. In the result, you can see number of land parcels which can see river. It has more than 2,000 land parcel can see when the pixel resolution in 1 meter, but when it's come to 2 meter, it reduces around 1,700. But after that reduction is not that much great, but there's a reduction. The view on residential area is only for comparison. Residential area is common in every place, and I try to compare this one, and you can see almost every land parcel can see residential area. This is only for comparison. When it's come to density, number of land parcels with 0%, 0 to 1% in 1 meter is very high compared to other, both nature conservation air view and the river view. That means minor details can extract from the algorithm, but when it's come to 2 meter, that small proportion of the land parcels disappear, then it reaches to 100 from 400. That is a huge difference. And but in other all the other resolution, there's a reduction, but pattern is similar. Also, I calculate the total area under 1 kilometer. That means total visible area for all the land parcel in the Hunter's Hill area. It's about 1.4 into 10 to the power 8 square meters. But it reduces drastically at the 1 to 2, then rate is reduced. It's the same pattern from the number of land parcels and percentages, everything. 1 square meter, 1 meter resolution give rate. Now, in extract a lot of parcels in this study. This study, actually, I run small GWR models to evaluate the influence, but the problem is I only I only have 500 sales records in the Hunter's Hill area for a five-year period. I use structural variable, proximity variable, neighborhood variable, and U variables to estimate the effect of U variable. Here's the main, the coefficient difference in different models. Like 1 meter model actually is the grade and it's almost 1% effect on the price, but actually according to the number of points, it's only 500 I use here, and it's not concrete to say this is 1% is the effect, but there's a reduction when the percentage increase, and after that reduction is continue around 0.7, it's fluctuating. And in the study, I can do, in this small study, actually, I only apply for Hunter's Hill area. 1 meter resolution to the good results, and it extract most of the land uses which can see river view, and influence also high compared to other resolution, and low resolution DTM and DSM reduce the properties which may have actually there can be a view, but it reduces number of land parcels when we increase increase the pixel size up to 10, it has to get reduced. There's effect, and it is important to give more high resolution for the view estimation. And main limitation is time, because when it is in high resolution, it takes long time to run. It's pixel-based estimation, and especially 3D object like tree, we can see through under the canopy, but in DSM it covers everything, and it act as a barrier, and therefore it's underestimation can happen. And other thing is some important views, especially mountain view, you can't demarcate in our current land use. We have to figure out some other method. That's the main concern here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajith. That was a very interesting presentation. And I would like to open the floor for questions. And if anyone, you can also type in the chat and I'll read it out for the recording. Okay, so I'll start in the meanwhile, start the conversation in the meanwhile. Like, so where do you think, like, okay, wait, Sarah has raised her hand. Over to you, Sarah.
Hi, Bala. Hi, Ajith. Thank you very much, Ajith, for your presentation. It was very good topic. My question is that have you considered any kind of barriers in view analysis?
What kind of barriers actually?
So in view analysis, you know, we have different kind of barriers. We have buildings as barriers. We have, you know,
Yeah,
as you told.
Yeah, actually, that's why I use DSM, digital surface model. It includes everything. You can see this light color one is here. These are trees, and it includes everything, and I consider everything for the as a barrier.
Okay, and yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks very much, Sarah. And so, like, one of my the questions I wanted to ask was, so where do you think the data, like the future, is in terms of analyzing 3D? So if you want like a much finer model, like which part of the equation we should be working on?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
In terms of improving the model, so where do you think like we should go? The next steps are.
Actually, I try to optimize by this study is mainly based on the to reduce the pixel size because it's time consuming. That was my target, but it's not possible when I'm thinking about the resolution, because high resolution is the most accurate one at the moment in this small experiment. Or we can other thing is we have to give more power resources like processing power to increase the. That's the only way, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so that answers my question. And Hazel, so you have a question. Go ahead.
Thanks, Ajith. I'm interested, how do you distinguish between the value uplift that's associated with the view and
actually,
all of the other impacts on value?
I just change the. I only change the structure. I fix every other variables, and I evaluate the coefficient. I just only compare only coefficient values, and I use log price here. Then I can expect the percentage. And the coefficient is a positive value, that means increase the view. When we increase the percentage of view, it increases the price. And when the resolution is reduced, like 10 meters only have 0.7% effect on the price compared to 1.1 in the 1 meter resolution.
Okay, thank you.
Sean has a question, which I'll read it out for the recording. She says, thanks for the interesting presentation, Ajith. Could you use the DTM to analyze mountains, and where is the data sourced from?
Mountain, actually, that's the problem. We have to think about how to extract the mountain area, because it's not demarcated in current land classifications. Only top has that's the point of the highest point. Only that we have to think about to demarcate that area based on the elevation variation or something like that. Actually, that's the only thing we can do. And yeah.
Yeah, the second part of the question is like, where is the data sourced from?
Data source actually is a LiDAR data. This is from Geoscience Australia for digital surface model, digital terrain model, also derived from LiDAR data. It is also available in the Geoscience Australia. It's 1 meter resolution. It's the base resolution I use. Then I resample into 10 meter series.
Cool. Thanks, Ajith. Thanks, An. And Chris, your turn.
Thanks, Ajith. I was just wondering what you've got there. There seems to be a lot of different results with the percentage of river view. And your I'm also wondering with your R squared that and your adjusted R squared, they all seem to be fairly similar.
Yeah.
So does that mean you just use the 10 meter because it's a lot easier to use? And have you explored 30 meter or other? Because I know there's a lot of processing to get to calculate
actually,
this.
This is only for 500 records. We can't actually directly say it's only. I just use coefficient value to express the results. R square, yes, is also similar, but inflows of the river view are directly shown by coefficient. It reduces for this small sample. That's why I say I need to do it in the larger area. Then we can calculate what the effect more accurately.
Okay. So you've got results for larger areas, right?
No, I didn't do because I had to extract from a different area.
Okay, I'll be interested to see what that looks like because, as you said, it's a small sample size, so you know how reliable it is. But thanks.
Thanks very much, Chris. So we can take one more question if there is one. If anyone wants to, we'll move. Okay, I think there's no more here. Okay, cool. So thank you very much, Ajith. Like, that was a very interesting conversation and very fruitful discussion indeed, and especially like in terms of visualizing view and like make visualizing view in terms of like new technologies is like a very interesting topic to myself as well. Hoping to see like more outputs from this end, and thank you very much. So that brings us to the second part of the seminar. Our next speaker is Henry Petersen. Henry is one of the latest members of our City Futures. He is working with the Australian Housing Data Analytics Platform project. So AHDAP, like it's a long name there. Prior to this, he was with the High Performance Architecture Cluster at UNSW, and I would like to take the opportunity to welcome him to CFRC and the seminar series. And we thought like it would be a nice opportunity to see what Henry is like working on, his research interest, like and with the broader group as well. I'm looking forward to his talk on microclimate analysis in South Melbourne. Over to you, Henry.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bala. So hang on, I'll just get this on the screen. Get this to actually come up correct. Nope, that's the wrong one.
You should be able to switch the screens on your slideshow tab. And under your slideshow tab at the top, you might be able to make this which monitor the slideshow goes to.
Yeah, actually, it's hold on to that here.
Okay, cool.
Nope, no one. Yeah. Just select a different window.
Okay.
I've got both up. They just.
Yeah, that works. Cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so yeah, thanks, Bala. So yeah, my talk today will be data collection and visualization for microclimate analysis in South Melbourne. So yeah, I've met a few people here, but for those who haven't, as Bala said, my name's Henry Petersen. So I've been at UNSW for a little while, but I've been for the last couple of years working with the High Performance Architecture Group. So what are we going through today is a project I was doing with them for the last, about the last 12 months. So we started early 2020 and finished late last year, early this year. So yeah, my background, I started in computer science and moved from that to this. So originally, I think I was working more in biomedical text mining. So I've had a few different sort of research lives, but yeah, so I've recently joined the ADAP team as a software engineer data science role. But yeah, just like to run through this just as something I was working on last year, which I think is interesting, just to give an overview of some stuff I've been doing. So next slide. There we are. So yeah, first, so the urban heat island effect. As the title of this indicates, it's been a project mainly on urban microclimate. So urban heat island effect is one of the major challenges from climate change that will be faced basically into the future. So for those who aren't familiar with the urban heat island effect, this is where you have built up urban areas because of the combination of factors. So hard surfaces like a lot of concrete, so a lot of surfaces that will absorb radiation and emit heat. Because of the built form, effect on winds, less vegetation, that type of effect, you will get you actually get a significantly increased temperature relative to the surrounding areas. And this can actually be quite substantial, like more than just a couple of degrees. And as I'm sure you can imagine, so in like Sydney as an example, I can remember when I was a kid, the concept that there used to be this sort of myth you'd hear at school, I'm sure other people did too, that if the temperature ever hit 40 degrees, you get the day off. Well, I can remember at the start of another project I did with HPA, we were doing some data collection out in Western Sydney, and I think it hit 48 at Penrith. So 50 degrees isn't exactly mythical anymore. So, I mean, the world's getting hotter, and it's not out. Like, I think it's easy to see that in places like Western Sydney and some areas like this, the issues you get from excess urban heat can lead to increased mortality. So it can literally be a life and death issue in some cases. And yeah, so I think that this essentially is something that it's a recognized problem, thankfully. So a lot of governments are very focused, governments and developers are very focused on this. But there's different solutions that need to be put in place at all different levels. So local, right up to sort of federal and wider scope. So with what I'll be going through, so this project was focusing on a project we did with council in South Melbourne. So some of you may have actually recognised the image in the on the first slide as an aerial shot from Melbourne. The background here you might see is, hang on. Let's jump ahead to this one, which is a little easier. So this is South Melbourne. So you can see just in the north of this area, you've got the CBD of Melbourne, the old Knights Ground in the south, and Port Phillip council area, so South Melbourne. So this is a project we did with South Melbourne, with the Port Phillip City Council, specifically focusing on a small region just south of the CBD, so the South Melbourne study area. So this was a little over a square kilometre and a mix of CBD business in the north and mostly residential in the south. So yeah, just also to highlight this is a project that I worked on that ran basically for most of last year, funded by Port Phillip Council, and yeah, just to highlight, run by Landing, so some of you may know her, and also Matt Santamaris. So just also special thanks to them. They were running this project. So yeah, the main research questions for this project, we wanted to be able to get a better idea of the characteristics of this particular local microclimate. So when it comes to actually working out how you want to seek to deal with excess urban heat, it's not just a uniform approach that you can apply, take from one place, to find something that works in one place and apply it everywhere else. So in some cases, you might have issues that arise because of, say, a lack or particular synoptic or wind patterns. You might have also just different levels of temperature change the interventions that will actually work. A good example of this is trees. So you might think of, when you think of hot areas in somewhere like Australia, generally the things councils try and do is they put a lot of vegetation around, because that actually has been shown to lower temperatures. So it's not just the shading, but there's physical processes with like the evapotranspiration process from vegetation will actually act to lower surrounding temperatures. But then if you think about places like in the Middle East, think about what a city looks like over there, you don't really think of a lot of trees. You don't think of a lot of greenery. This is because these cities are routinely so hot that the cooling effect from vegetation actually kind of inverts when you hit, I think it's 37, 38 degrees. I forget the exact value. But essentially, you can get areas that are so hot that vegetation, far from not doing anything useful, actually becomes a problem. So this is something just interesting. It's in order for Port Phillip Council to get the best bang for their buck, they were after just some details on the local microclimate characteristics for the study zone. And then based on that, quantifying the cooling potential of a number of various intervention scenarios, and finally some recommendations that they could actually put into use for future planning and development guidelines. So I think part of the reason, part of the funding for this project was made available because they were working basically in the process of developing a plan towards 2050, so development guidelines that will be used for the next 30 years. So as a result of this project, we wound up publishing a report with such recommendations. So it was a relatively large project that covered a number of different areas, but what I'm going to focus on today is mostly the data collection and some of the data sets we generated as a result of this project. So I will go over, for example, the intervention scenarios we proposed, but I think some of that was other people on the project, a bit more sort of domain experts in sort of climate change and urban architecture, town planning. So yeah, I'll be going over, I think, some of the data generation, and also a little bit on the website, on an online tool we use to publish some of this data. So yeah, for the project, there were a number of different steps that we followed that had different data sets we created at each stage. So going back to the three sort of main research aims of the project, the first being a characterization of the existing microclimate for the South Melbourne precinct, so basically determining what the issues were, any specific areas, and what the causes of excess urban heat that can be addressed locally in those areas are. So in order to do that, we collected 3 different data sets. Well, the third one, actually, reading this should probably actually be more under climate context, but anyway, it's fine. Surface temperature, so aerial mapping of the area of the South Melbourne precinct to take surface temperature, and also some monitoring to collect air temperature data. And then a few others that I'll run through later, basically once we've characterized the local microclimate. The 3D models for climate simulation of the different scenarios we came up with. Yeah, we then had additional data that we had to collect for those. I'll go through that in a bit. Yeah, so the slide seems to... Okay, and sorry, I think I've got this slightly out of order, but yeah, so the first thing was the existing microclimate data we had to collect. So you've actually got a screenshot in the background. I can show this separately in the actual tool, online tool as well. But that's taken from some aerial photography. We hired a light plane to fly over the area and take thermal imaging of the precinct. I'll go through that in a bit more detail on a next slide. I think I might have modified that. Sorry. So the first year data. So this one was an interesting thing we wound up doing. So we wound up purchasing and installing 10 air and humidity sensors in the Port 10 different locations inside the Port Phillip precinct. So you can see in the bottom right, I'll show a larger version of that in a second. But so at 10 different locations, we paid someone to, we basically installed these sensors and ran them for the best part of a year, collecting data. So this originally these were going to be installed at the very start or even end of start of last year or the end of 2019 and run over summer. But then just for reasons, because contracts sometimes take a little bit longer to get signed, we ran kind of into January, and then all of a sudden the world changed, and it was kind of no longer so easy to just go down to Melbourne and install sensors. So yeah, we wound up, that got delayed. We wound up hiring someone down there to be able to go around and install them for us, which was worked out fine. But as part of this, in the end, we were able to install the sensors, and at several points during the time, we were able to collect the readings from them. They all functioned well, which was nice, and get essentially CSVs with the, I think it's roughly about 10 minutes, there's 10 to 15 minutes readings, I think, from memory, for pretty much an entire June to June period. So this actually has now been released, this data set, by Port Phillip. So there's a link there, you'll see. So they actually released it on data.gov, which is nice. But also, so I might just bring up, see if I can actually, nope. Yep, so just switching screen. So yeah, this is just a website we hosted this on. So if I go to this, so local sensor data, so we have the 10 different sensors here. So this is just a simple representation. So we have different points for each of them. So CBD's up here, Knight's Ground here. And yeah, so just a very simple visualization here. I think as mentioned, the data is actually available for download publicly under Creative Commons license. But yeah, this was just an interesting one to collect, and all the more interesting for the hassle that was gone through collecting it. Anyway, so also just while I've got this up, I can also show, so this was collected by light planes. So we, again, previous projects we've done, we have hired drone operators to fly over various areas in the Greater Sydney region and take thermal imaging for us. So typically this was done, as mentioned, with drones. So you get LiDAR, and then you can create the images from that. One issue we ran into this, as mentioned with previously, just suddenly traveling to Melbourne got a lot harder last year. And also because of the location, if I zoom out a bit, you've got the CBD up here. So flying a drone around here is not so easy. So this was actually done by light plane instead. So at several passes very high up. And I think one of the interesting things, it was given to us essentially just as a geotiff with just heat temperature values, so in Kelvin. Then this heat map was created. I made this just thresholding values and then using matplotlib to create, to just apply a color map. But I think one of the interesting things that you can see with this is it shows you some of the real differences between areas in the precinct. So you can see there's a very high temperatures running along the north and especially northeast of the precinct. So this area here is mostly like the CBD, so sort of larger buildings. And I think this area here is sort of ex-industrial. So you get a lot more sort of exposed and less vegetation on roads, so a lot more exposed roads, exposed hard surfaces, so you get excess heat. Down here is a lot more residential, so there's a little bit more green space, private trees, private greenery. So it's less of an issue south. Also, I suppose as you get further south, you get closer to the ocean. I think in the modelling we conducted, generally it was a northerly wind, which one thing we were able to see from the modelling of this precinct is the temperatures, perhaps unsurprisingly, hottest days are characterised by northerly rather than southerly winds. But anyway, so to jump back to the okay. Yeah, so just I think this is mostly what I just went through then. So we also had the surface temperatures. Oh, I am running very slow. Okay, so then we also collected air temperature data. So this was just purchased from BOM. Not particularly interesting. I think the most interesting thing here, if people haven't done this before, is so for BOM stations, they sell it essentially for $99, which just any arbitrary number of stations. They essentially charge per query. So if you ask for one station for a week or every station they have across the entire state for the last 10 years, same flat fee. Often quite interesting data. But anyway, we got that. So after having a look at the microclimate characteristics, so as mentioned, big issues for this precinct, the northerly northerly CBD and post-industrial area in the northwest. We went through and created a number of intervention scenarios. I won't go through this in too much detail because this was done by Lan and Will, so people with more sort of domain expertise. Questions like what was, not just what intervention scenarios were most likely to have the greatest effect needed to be considered, but also things like development constraints, so restrictions on setbacks, heritage restrictions were quite a big issue that constrain what they can and cannot do in Port Phillip. So that restricts what they can do in terms of applying high reflective materials to certain surfaces and whatnot, changes the retrofits they can do. But anyway, we have these 9 scenarios on the right. So once this had been identified, we then had to create 3D models for each of the, or for the precinct and for each of the scenarios. So there's 2 sort of main steps to this. One is creating models for visualization, and then second for microclimate simulations. So for each of these, scenarios, we built a 3D model in software NBMet, which is a fluid dynamics climate simulation software. And then simulated the effects of, simulated the local street level air temperature under the same sort of external conditions with the different interventions employed, and use that to make the recommendations. So for the, but anyway, we had to create 2 separate 3D sets of data for this. So the visualization models were generally created, or 2 separate sources. One is publicly available data or data we were given by council, so already there. So we got building outlines from 3D models we were provided by council, trees, and also manually constructed from near maps, as well as for scenarios which included things like new buildings that were simply planned but not there yet, or the provision of new sort of different streets, different materials at street level and whatnot. These were modelled in SketchUp. So a lot of this was automated with FME, which, for those of you who haven't used it, total recommend, very nice program. It's no more powerful than the ability to just use a Python script, but it's a very, very easy way to get something up and running very quickly. Just very nice piece of software. So yeah, basically automated as much of this as possible from existing data. What wasn't available, we built in SketchUp. So you can see in the background here is an example of some surface cover data that we modeled, and the buildings in the white background image are planned buildings for new developments that they will be proceeding with in Port Phillip for one particular scenario. So given these buildings don't yet exist, we had to model them separately. And then, yeah, using those, we were able to construct models and put those into the tool. So this was mostly for visualization purposes. So just for brevity, I won't jump across to the website, but this is a screenshot of what we wound up with. So you can see a few different types of data here. You've got in the south of this screenshot, you've got just the textureless, essentially just bounding boxes extruded to an appropriate height. So these are just 3D models that we obtained from the council. And then in the north of the precinct, you can also see the buildings with some green roofs applied. These are the newer buildings to which we've applied interventions, and also just green boxes to indicate where we have greenery for the particular scenario that's being shown. Very briefly, we also did some macro scale analysis. So this was used mostly for context in to be able to set boundary conditions in the climate simulation. So this was conducted, we contracted a researcher in Urbino in Italy. So this is conducted with WRF. So in contrast to the microclimate simulation, this is 200 by 200 meter cells. So you can see in that top image there, each of those colored squares shows an individual cell that has to be represented by a single value. So you essentially take the average material, average properties for those precincts, but then you run this at a very, very wide scale. So you can see that image at the bottom there gives you an idea of just how broad this is. So essentially you're running it over the entire Greater Melbourne area, which you then, both for the report, we got charts. It's not so much important for the moment, but then also we were able to visualize that. And so you can see an example, that bottom image is an example of one particular time step in one of the scenarios. Bay, you can see the bay in blue at the bottom, and the scope. So there's the little white bit in the middle there is the Port Phillip Council area. And this is just an example of some of the things we got out of it. So this is just again, visualizations of each of the results of this created in Matplotlib and then just strung together, just showing the temperature changes. Each time step here is an hour. This was over 4 days, I believe, the 20th of January 2020 to the 24th, I think. Anyway, the microclimate simulations then were conducted in NBMet. So this is unfortunately proprietary software, but there's not really a good option that we were aware of that doesn't require either much more specialized hardware or significantly greater modeling of the physics. This NBMet is designed to use a lot of just standard settings that produce reasonable results. So the process for this was essentially we built the model. So you can see some steps that were employed just in the images to the right. So a lot of this again started from a very similar place to the visualization model, so just bounding boxes. The model is much more simpler. So this is using a 6 by 6 by 6 meter discretized grid. So a lot of features just have to be simplified out, and there's a lot of it's a bit of an iterative process. For something like this, you wind up, you build the model, you run the numerical simulation, And then you wind up having to go back and make small changes to models to try and actually get them to run correctly. So for example, let's say you have a tree placed right very close to a building with a corner near it. If you don't have sufficient space you either need, if you don't have sufficient space between them to allow airflow to be calculated accurately, this can lead essentially to numerical errors as the solvers try to actually compute the flow at each step. So you wind it, as I said, it's a bit of an iterative process. It's a bit of an art, really, trying to get it to actually work. But in the end, you wind up with paired XML data files that with the local climate variables. It's an open format, so just data files with just raw XML, with just raw numerical data, so it could just be loaded into a NumPy array, and associated XML files that show what basically allow you to interpret it. This is very easy to script, as you can see in the bottom right there. I've done this in Excel with VBA before, but also very easy to just process this with Python and generate generate heat maps, average for precincts and whatnot. Online tool, again, just for the sake of brevity, we're pushing 5 o'clock. We loaded a what-if scenario analysis to allow Port Phillip Council to play with this and visualize the effects of different scenarios. And as a result, the recommendations, essentially high SRI surfaces at a ground level produce a very high bang for buck, as do vegetation, which is nice. One of the big, you can see it if you look at some of the top-down shots of some of the temperature difference heat maps. So when you put in the interventions. But one of the big characteristics with Port Phillip, with this area, is the north-south breeze, essentially. So a breeze running north to south really propagates heat down the precinct. So it was quite interesting that trees running along the north-south streets actually produced quite a significant result compared to some other locations, seemingly because it got in the way of some of the wind flow. But yeah, so in the end, I think we published, there was a number of recommendations in the report. So just acknowledgements. So the UNSW teams are led by Lan and a number of people, also City of Port Phillip, and a number of others. Yeah, thank you. And sorry for running over.
No issues at all. That was very interesting presentation. So we'll open the questions with Chris.
Thanks, Henry. Yeah, really interesting work there. Just wondering, the recommendations that you made with the modelling, working with council and so forth, how did they respond to the modelling and the recommendations? Did they adopt any of those recommendations in the design of the precinct, or yeah, how were the modelling results used? Do you know?
Yeah, for this particular precinct, I'm not sure yet. I've not heard anything since. Not heard anything personally. I'm sure Lan or Will have.
So what about then even in the Sydney work?
Yeah, so in the Sydney work, I know, for example, in Green Square, I recall seeing some fountains in there that weren't on the original plan. And that's actually one thing that we certainly have noticed in a few areas too, is that misting has produced in some areas really, really good results. The thing with misting is it's a great local targeted solution. If you can identify areas, particularly with a lot of hard surfaces, you can get a great localized effect, but it's not going to propagate in the same way that green space or wide application of cool surfaces might. But yeah, sorry, the short answer is, though, I'm not sure on specific ones, though, for Port Phillip.
No worries. But it's good, yeah, and totally it was used in Sydney, and that misting is quite an interesting effect. I remember being in Arizona in Tempe and a lot of the streets there, because being, I guess, in a very hot desert climate, made it quite livable having that misting. Thanks, Henry.
Cool. One from my side. So, especially like so, I've done works with sensor-based data collected from large areas. So one of the issues we have is when you're working at a micro level, micro scale, is that like trying to find anomalies because of something other than like the larger pattern we want to figure out. So for example, like when we are trying to count pedestrians with Wi-Fi, and then if there's a phone shop, it will just like throw the whole sensor off right next to the sensor. So even climate, like for example, some sensors have been, something changed at the micro level. So how would you say like we go about like tackling those, like so when you're looking at micros level at like environment, and how do you filter out all the micro level noises caused in them? So when you're doing a long-term, large-scale deployment of the same. So it'll be easy for like 5 or 6 sensors, but like when you're looking at 600,000 sensors.
Yeah. So it can sort of depend on what you're doing with the data. So in some cases, if there are, so in some cases, you might just sort of notice a jump in sensors in one particular temperature sensor. It just starts reporting, say, a few degrees more. And this could just be because, as you say, something nearby it is all of a sudden producing heat or something, or the sensor just malfunctions, water gets in, which actually we had for one of these, one of the sensors we deployed, we lost the last 2 months of data. It reported data, but it made no sense. And when the sensors were mailed back up to us, and you open it up and you can actually see where the water's got in and corroded bits of the inside. A lot of this, I think the best way to do it is really just compare sensors to other sensors around them. To some extent, it can be hard to pick up. I mean, if you have one sensor that starts reporting sometimes behavior that seems quite bizarre can actually be perfectly legitimate. And I suppose in that type of case, I'm the wrong person to ask on that. We had people on that team who have a far more understanding. But for example, you have places like, so having explained to me, so you can see data in somewhere like, say, Riyadh or say somewhere more of a desert. It's not going to change in the same way as something that you might have in, say, Sydney. I can recall one data set that we had for Green Square where the temperature is sitting around sort of 35, 36 for most of the day. And then all of a sudden in the space of 2 hours, it was like 24. So the temperature just, the wind switch, you get the sea breeze in and the temperature just plummets. So yeah, basically, to answer your question, it's a combination of comparing sensors to other sensors around them and trying to spot anomalies that way. Trying to apply a rule-based approach for certain areas. So if you are in a part of the lake, so let's say you're in a desert area and all of a sudden the temperature, humidity just jumps or something, you know that that's probably not legitimate for that type of area. Yeah, so a combination of manual and the best you can do comparing to context.
Cool. Thank you very much. We have one question from Chris. I think we can take this one, I guess, like we're like 5 running over. But what were the reasons for the selected 10 locations?
Combination of money, actually. The sensors were rather expensive. We would have done a few more if we had cash. One other thing that would have been nice to do actually is have these reports basically upload the data automatically to a centralized server. Rather than the approach we took where we literally had to send someone around with a phone and connect to them via Bluetooth.
Were there any reason behind the location chosen?
Right, so the location, combination of trying to get a decent spread. In general, we were looking for areas in the north, and so there's a bit of a weighting towards the north and that north-south column, the main street that was one of the hotter areas on that aerial photography. Also, finding somewhere where we could safely put them nice and high up so no one would come by and hit them with a bat. because people do that. So security was a thing too. That was one thing I was really pleased with. These sat there for a year and no one stole any of them.
Thanks, Henry. That's a really nice presentation. Just on that note, are you keeping a record of not only the latitude and longitude, but the height of the sensors? Yeah,
so we have quite detailed notes for each. So I go back here, there's a quick screenshot of one of them. So the top image there is an after photo taken of one of the installs. So before we installed these, we agreed with council first. We had to find a pole or something to install them on. We had photos of that before, photos of that after. So this is also just because, I mean, they're equipment we are installing. If we damage the pole, that's our responsibility. So that was one issue we had to sort of deal with Port Phillip first. But yes, everything's photographed. We know exactly what something was attached to, exactly where. Yes, yeah, we tried to make an effort to document that.
So was that actually like height above Australia, Australian height datum, or?
Oh, yeah, it's no. These are not. I forget the standard, but no, these are not the exact 2 meters. 2 meters above ground. It was sort of as close as possible, where possible. We were restricted in cases like this one, for example. So that one was just at the top of the street pole. There was another one so the one in the northwest of the precinct is in a supermarket car park. So I think that one was a little higher up, again, just to find somewhere that could safely be left without people climbing to access it. Yeah, well, so unfortunately, it's not exactly at 2 meters.
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, there's a big sort of vertical dimension to the temperatures as well, isn't there? Like.
Yes. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah.
Great presentation. Thanks.
Cool. So I think we are like 10 minutes past 5. Sorry for running over the designated time. It was really interesting presentation. Thank you very much, Henry. And looking forward to working with you, and looking forward to meeting you soon as well, once we come back to campus. And thank you very much for joining us for the seminar today. And we'll hope to see you in 2 weeks. We still haven't finalized the speakers, but that we should announce next week by Wednesday, hopefully. So thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you all in the next seminar. Bye, guys.
Great. Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks, Ajith. Thanks, Paul.